HTML, or hypertext markup language, forms the structural foundation of any web page, but there are many other languages that fall into the realm of web development. To build this project, we're also going to learn CSS, or cascading style sheets. This language will help us modify things like fonts, colors, page layout, and so on. Just about anything that has to do with the visual aesthetics can be accomplished with CSS. Just like HTML, we'll get into CSS in much more detail later on, but we should try out some simple CSS first, just so that you can see how it works. Let's jump into our workspace and add some style. Workspaces has several settings that we can adjust depending on our personal preferences. I'm going to click on the View menu, and I'm going to select Highlight Active Line. This won't change anything about the project, but it will highlight the line that we're working on. If I press Enter a few times and create more lines, you can see that it will highlight wherever my cursor is. I'm going to delete these extra lines because we won't need them, but if you'd like to turn on line highlighting as well, you can go ahead and do so in the View menu. You can also make other changes in the View menu, such as increasing or decreasing the font size. You can also restore the default font size. In addition, you can adjust these using keyboard shortcuts. So I can go ahead and hit Command+ on my Mac to increase or decrease the font size. Now, let's get back to our project. So far, we have a first-level headline element on the page. Let's try to change this to a blue color. Just above the headline, I'm going to create a new blank line, and I'm going to type some style tags like this. Once again, you'll notice that Workspaces auto-completes the style element once I've typed the opening tag. Now inside of these tags, we can write CSS, which is another language in addition to HTML. We'll learn more about CSS and HTML, but for now, just go ahead and follow along with me. Even though we're doing this inside of our HTML file, CSS is a different language with a different syntax, so pay close attention. Now, I'm going to hit Enter a few times to make some room to work. Now, between our style tags, I'm going to hit the Tab key to indent my code slightly. That way, I'll know what code is inside of my style tags, and it will be easily readable. This doesn't affect the functionality of the code at all, but once again, it makes it easier to read. These tabs will make it clear that the code that I'm about to type is nested inside of our style tags. Down in the bottom right, you'll notice that Workspaces has automatically detected that this is an HTML file, so it will highlight our code appropriately and make it easy to read. You'll also see the word spaces and to down here. If I click on spaces, it will switch to tab size, but we want to keep this as spaces. The difference is that when I hit tab, having spaces selected will type spaces instead of a full tab. You can see that there are two separate spaces here if I highlight it. I can adjust the number of spaces it types by just clicking this number 2 and changing it to a 4 and hitting Enter. Now, if I type in my workspace and hit a tab, it will actually indent by 4 spaces. This is just a personal preference, so you can go ahead and change this to whatever you'd like. However, most programmers use spaces, and they only use 2 spaces, so you may want to keep those defaults. Once again, this will not change the functionality of your code, it's just personal preference and makes your code easier to read. I've deleted my tab, so I'm going to hit tab once again, which will actually type 2 spaces in this case, and I'm going to type H1. This is what's called a selector. It will tell the browser which HTML element we'd like to apply our styling to. More specifically, this is what's called an element selector. There are many different types of CSS selectors that we'll learn about, but this one is very simple for now. Next, let's type a space after our H1, followed by 2 curly braces. You can type curly braces by pressing Shift and the square bracket keys on your keyboard. So that's an opening curly brace, and that's a closing curly brace. Now, place your cursor between the 2 curly braces and press Enter twice. This will give us some space to work. Once again, I'm going to hit Tab to indent my code again because the code I'm about to type will be nested inside of this element selector, which is nested further inside of our style tags. Finally, we're ready to apply some styling to our headline element. Type out the word color like this. Then type a colon by holding down Shift and pressing the semicolon key, followed by a space, and then typing the word blue. At the end of this line, type a semicolon. The first part of this line is what's called a property, and the second part of this line is what's called a value. We'll go over many CSS properties and values later on, but for now, it's just important to get the syntax right. In workspaces, if you highlight a CSS color, it will give you a preview of what that color looks like. Make sure that you've typed everything in your workspace, just as I have in my workspace, and then save the file. Once again, you can do this by hitting Command-S on a Mac or Control-S on Windows. You can, of course, also do this by going to the File menu and hitting Save, but it's faster to use the keyboard shortcut. Now, if we preview our workspace, you'll see that the text color has changed from black to blue. Changing colors is probably the simplest thing that you can do in CSS. There's much more to learn, and as we'll discover, CSS is extremely powerful and can do far more than just simple text formatting. In fact, most CSS is so complex that you wouldn't ever want to put it inside of your HTML document. As we'll learn later on, most websites are built with separate HTML and CSS documents. If you think you're ready, take the code challenge after this video and write some CSS on your own.